Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly. It's the 11th of September 2025. I'm your host, Chris Gallagher, for this week, giving Barry another wee week off. We are going to talk about Glasgow Celtic in detail. It's been a troubling week, shall we say, from the Celtic fandom's perspective. I'm going to introduce the panel now. Barry Gallagher's here. Hello, Barry. How are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm keeping it concise this week. Thank you.
Calm down with the thing last week. Good to hear from you, Barry. And of course, our good friend Stuart Dugan. Hello, Stuart. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I am also good.
Good stuff.
There you go.
We have had a topsy-turvy roller coaster of a week from a Celtic point of view. We'll talk through most of it. We maybe give a little bit of a timeline. If you are a subscriber to The Cynic, which you can do at thecynic.co, or you can check us out on Patreon by searching for The Cynic, we have touched on some of these points this week, but we've got a different panel now, so maybe give a different perspective, and I think that's one of the joys of having an extended amount of contributors. Can I get my words out? Opening question. Let's just start. Let's get into it. And there is a lot to cover, and there is some breaking stuff to cover as well. So, like anything else comes out, we'll bring up as quickly as we can. But the opening question is: how has this week felt for you as a Celtic supporter, Stuart Dugan?
I think quite long. When I read that, and I thought back to some of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight, and I was like, was that week? Was that last week? Did we not talk about this last week? But I suppose from when we were here last Thursday, it was a lot of stuff with the fallout about the window. Maeda had made his comments by then, hadn't he?
No, that was the Friday.
Right.
So we've not really touched on that. So
yeah, so on the Friday you get the Maeda stuff. On the Saturday you get the statement. You get the open letter. That happened last week?
No, we don't. We discussed that last week.
So Friday was that dies, and Saturday during the day was the briefing against the manager.
Briefing against the man. Fucking these things that I've even forgotten about. And then you get the statement, the fallout of the statement. You get the votes of no confidence. You get the fan groups coming together. I know there was a meeting last night, which we'll talk a little bit about. But in general, it feels like maybe yesterday's been the only kind of down period that we've had in the whole week. And obviously tomorrow there'll be a real eye on the pressers. It's the first chance for them to ask Rodgers, and you can't even imagine where they'll start with it, given all the stuff that we've talked about just in that week, let alone the bin fire that was the end of the window. And then, yes, start to see whether there's any quality left in the team and if any of these new players are good. So it's pretty mad, it's pretty whirlwind. I would say, though, that for all the instability and for all the potential chaos around the club, I feel quite calm. I feel like...
Good for you.
No, I just mean in terms of the reaction to it. I think that the volume of support there's been for change, and just the fact that it's been done in a really organised and sensible way so far, I know it's very early days, fills me with a bit of confidence that maybe something different will happen this time and that it won't just peter out. And, you know, we talked a lot about, you know, Rangers fans, they just let their club die and blah, blah, blah. And it's very easy to make those sort of comments when everything's really rosy in the garden, and now things aren't, even though objectively we are still the best team in Scotland. And it's nice to see how, as a support, we go about trying to make, you know, active change at the club. And hopefully that continues, and there will be challenges to that, but I think there are already some kind of green shoots of positivity.
Great stuff, Stu. A little bit of positivity. Good to hear it. Barry, doom and gloom. Let's go.
It's funny, actually, because Stu's kind of outlined there the amount of things that have happened this week, but I was thinking usually you dread international weeks or the fortnight that it happens regularly throughout the season, but I almost think that perversely this has come at a good time. It's allowed fans to sort of mobilise without games, because I think we all sort of have concerns that if you start to win football matches, then things might look a bit different for some, not for all, obviously, and you hope that doesn't happen. But I think that the 2 weeks without football has been tumultuous, as we've mentioned, but it has given the opportunity to focus on the off-the-pitch things without the distraction of a game, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, like, it has been mental, and kind of thinking ahead to tomorrow. Like, I don't know how Rodgers might try and do it with his humorous way. especially if whoever from the Sun asks the first question or whatever might be the case. But I kind of go along with what Stuart was saying about it has been sort of grueling, I think, up until this point. But one thing that's really enthused me is how almost all of the supporters groups, fan media, etc., supporters buses are all seeming to be pulling in the one direction. And as we'll come on to talk about, the kind of actions that how we move forward as a support, but it's almost feeling like we've endured, and that's not to say it won't get worse because it might, but we've endured quite a lot since the last time we played football, and now, as we'll mention, that there are things in place and things are going to build momentum. So I feel quite calm and I feel quite positive about the fact that we do seem to be pulling in the one direction. And in the past we've mentioned that. I know that Rodgers kind of, in the way that he does, he mentioned before about the holy trinity of the Celtic support, the players and the management and the hierarchy pulling in the one direction, like the holy trinity. But too often I think the support isn't as unified as it you would like to think it is, but now it does feel that there is a real appetite for change.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of jump out all over the place a little bit. There's we've got a rundown, but we'll probably go back and forth. But just on obviously the press conference tomorrow, we're going to do something that we don't usually do on the Cynic tomorrow. We're going to do a pod, basically a reaction pod to the press conference. Myself, excuse me, and our very good friend Eddie Walsh will kind of break down the press conference, pick out the best. It might be a kind of generic dull press conference, but you'd imagine, there'll be some tonal stuff there. So we'll do that tomorrow, and looking forward to that. On the briefing, so essentially, again, the briefing against the manager, I've got a piece of paper here with some of the information on it. Just some of the quotes. So this was in the Sun. A lot of people turn around and say that it's just made up and it's not in any way true. But you need to read between the lines when it comes to this Celtic board. Some of the quotes were, senior figures inside the club believe Rodgers is engineering his exit. What he said in public has torn the club apart. On and off the record, discussions are creating division throughout the club. He's the only manager in the club's history who has repeatedly questioned things. It's been the same board, same management, the same strategy. When Brendan came back, he agreed to the club's strategy. There are now people inside the club who are deeply unhappy with his words. So that came out. Stuart, what did you kind of make of that? Again, just another layer of strategy from the board, I guess?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's like mis-strategy. Like they're sort of very, very bad.
I meant to say Machiavellian, which would have been better.
You said it now.
Frank.
Annoyingly quite good.
Good stuff. He's bailed you out there.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really cheap and really, I think it's really evident from the statement, which I know we'll talk about, that they do think they're smarter than they evidently are. They're not very good at doing these sorts of things, and I think they do really underestimate the average intelligence of football fans in general, but Celtic fans specifically.
Yeah,
that you'll read that and go, oh wait, I hated Brendan Rodgers and I mind he left us, so it is all his fault. And there's stuff in there that it's just so objectively untrue. With next to, like, you don't have to dig deep. There was a dossier of quotes that were going around last week from managers as far back as Martin O'Neill, who cite almost verbatim like the exact same issues. Neil Lennon, Ange Postecoglou.
See, just trying to jump in, but see, O'Neill did the kind of press, didn't he, before the derby, and he kind of said that's just the way the Celtic board are. So even as recent as a week before that went out. Yeah.
So that is a nonsense, and I think that I don't doubt that Brendan Rodgers' position and the way he is personally will have probably created some friction in terms of how business is done. We know that happened last time, and I don't think it's a reach to presume that that's what's happened this time. But it also doesn't mean that Brendan Rodgers was wrong to demand higher standards, and the standards are so unbelievably low.
It's insane.
That we're not even, the main narratives being spun about, financial fair play and there's only so much money you can spend. I'm not the first person that said it. I think it's a really common sense point. But the Celtic fans are not looking for the board to go and spend 60 or 70 million pounds this summer. And I don't think, I mean, Celtic could. They actually could, and then have some barren years where they don't spend as much money. But like, they're not that close to the wind in terms of PSR that would be an issue. Celtic are just wanting the board to probably spend 25-ish million pounds, but in a timely fashion, and don't fuck about with last minute signings that you can't get over the line when you've got really important Champions League games. It's just mismanagement. So when you see so much mismanagement so blatantly out in the open, and then they brief to the Sun of all newspapers as well, I was really pleased that nobody really took it seriously. No. Everyone immediately just went, fuck them. And I think that they are now in a position where they are so in the hole that there's next to nothing they can do. And you're seeing it now start, and I don't want to take the subject away from what we're talking about, but you can see it now in the sort of hesitancy to announce the Europa League packages, and there's been a new Adidas merch drop that the club haven't announced. And, you know, they don't quite know what they're doing.
Financial reports
coming.
That'll be explosive.
Exactly. So, yeah, and I think that the more that they keep coming out with stuff like this and it gets batted away, the stronger the case for change becomes.
Yourself, Barry, what was your kind of thoughts on the briefing to one of the most ghastly fucking outlets in Britain?
Yeah, wild. But just before I come to that, see just what Stuart's saying there, anything they do now will be subject to ridicule. Like, I think any credibility they had by these two acts that they did on the same day on Saturday has fucked that. Like, you've got people who have no affiliation to Celtic laughing at them down south, and if you add that to all the chairmen who laughed at them throughout the transfer window, their reputation is toast. Like, they're finished, I think. And all it really comes to is how quickly we can get rid of them by all the things that we'll talk about later. But in terms of briefing against the manager, it's even that, we often say about like Celtic being stuck in the 90s or the early 2000s. Even briefing to the Sun is a very 1990s thing to do.
Yeah.
And again, like sources close to the club, like it was out this kind of Celtic board playbook. And again, I know Paul Carlin mentioned it about that kind of sympathy towards Rodgers, and I maybe do more than some on the pod, but I don't think he's blameless in this, but that's not the fight that we should be having just now. And I think that, not to say we'll all rally behind the manager, but we'll rally behind the team, and it's just looking for people to blame, and it's classic what they do. Like, if we look at how they briefed against the manager, said all the things about like, oh, there was players presented they didn't want, and he's kind of torn the club apart. Like, that language is so
it's wild, man.
So dangerous.
Yeah.
And then that didn't have the desired effect that they had on Saturday, so they thought, right, fucking get that statement out a few hours later. Like,
still writing it. All the monkeys.
Like, oh shit, isn't working either. So it just adds to the shambolic feeling around the club.
See this notion that, you know, these are Celtic men who work 24 hours a day and they bleed green and white and stuff like that.
That guy's feeling it put that out.
To what benefit? So obviously they've mismanaged the transfer window to just disastrous degree that we're now potentially lumbered with a squad that's not good enough to compete. Maybe they will. Maybe, as I say, we talked about this last week, maybe one of the two new players will inject a little bit of something. Maybe the players can sort of find some of their form. But what benefit would it possibly have to... You've already discredited the manager, undermined them with the whole Adamida, those kind of actions and comments. What benefit does it have to point the gun at him when you are just about to go into 6 months of continuous football where there's nothing else that can be done? We have the players that we have. It's sabotage essentially at that point. And do they just want someone else to come in that they feel that would be more malleable when it comes to the next window? And do they think that if Rodgers becomes the fall guy, like, oh, the reason the window didn't go well is because Brendan Rodgers was difficult and he goes...
It deflects from them.
And then they can go again.
Do you think that was ultimately their goal, that he would see this, blow his top and resign this week?
What conclusion can you draw?
I mean, what I would say is, like, we sat here last Thursday and said Brendan Rodgers had us out and he didn't take it. And then on the Monday, when he said about the Friday, when he said about them bleeding green and white and all that, I think that all kind of rubbed us up the wrong way. but he got another. They gave him another out.
Yeah,
but I'm not blaming Brendan Rodgers. As we said, this isn't about Brendan Rodgers anymore. That it's not been about Brendan Rodgers or the players or any of that for the last week or so. And the fact is, Rodgers does have my sympathy because he's made himself look like an arse in the media by defending these guys. And the first opportunity they take, they fire right back at him.
See, I kind of think differently about that now than I did this time last week about that Friday press conference when he said. I almost feel like that was sarcasm in a way, like fuck yous, like I'll say, like how great you are. Because there's rumours, I know we don't want to perpetuate rumours, but rumours that Desmond kind of was on at him to apologise, and that was almost like laying it on so thick. Like, these guys live for Celtic.
Yeah, I think that's probably beyond the rumour now. I think that's probably more than likely happened that he called them back to apologise. I think that's probably from what we know about how Dermot Desmond treats certain reporters who we are aware of. I think it's pathetic. So I guess what they wanted to do was they wanted Rodgers either to resign or to stay in place, and for us to all go, "Oh, Brendan Rodgers is the reason that it's not worked out." And boo. Is there any chance Rodgers could leave before? No,
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, just when you're talking about what they hoped, whatever their plan was when they did that, the immediate byproduct was to destabilise the team and destabilise the season more so, which is just staggeringly negligent. Whether it's for their own, self-preservation, it's kind of an unacceptable thing to do on top of the many unacceptable things that they've done. I don't think that Rodgers will willingly go. I think that the only chance that you have of that happening is if we really go off a cliff form-wise, and if it begins to look untenable, and then maybe you do have a sort of mutual consent because there's so much going on behind the scenes. I think inevitably he's going to be asked about the board, and I think tomorrow inevitably he's going to say, look, all managers would want the players in, but we are where we are, and we move forward with the players.
We need to have a think about what we're doing in the future.
And it's going to be all that, because he can't. They've tied his hands in the way that he can't go, the business was not good enough, because then what do you do with Sebastian Tenetke and Balikwisha? How do you get a game out of them? And
you could say that in a way that says we did good business, but we needed to do more, and that's a failing. If he does, see, this is the thing, right? So if there is a broadside from Rodgers in any way, that will be a shot back at the board. If there's not, then it's all going to be very, underlying stuff, which I'd rather he just came out and went, look, they took a shot at me, take a shot back. Do you know what I mean? Like, we've got some questions. I just want to fire out some of these because people have been sending them in. This is from Stephen in Cardiff. He says, just a question for the panel. Long-time listener, first-time caller. And then he says, note, we have all three of the things he's going to discuss. I see three parties that can address, where many of them will cross over. Match-going supporters and season ticket holders, shareholders and other supporters. That's people who are onto Celtic TV, people who pay kits and all that. Are there separate things that each can do? Are there things we can all do? I live in Cardiff. I'm a shareholder. I go to a couple of games a season. I don't feel comfortable in calling for a boycott or even to ask people not to buy kit. It's just not a big thing for me to give that up. Interesting to hear your thoughts. So, match-going supporters and season ticket holders, shareholders, other supporters who may be abroad, maybe, like just on Celtic TV. Are there things we can all do separately, or are there things we can all do together? I think that's one thing where if you are a season ticket holder and you go to every game, or you go to every away game, someone who's not a season ticket holder or doesn't go to a game demanding that you make a boycott, I can understand why that would annoy people. What's your kind of thoughts?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because ultimately we are all Celtic supporters, and I tried real hard to not say die hard to see when season ticket holder,
Love it.
But in terms of what we can all do, I think one thing that kind of jumps out to me is merchandise, because I think that we've seen like we become an elite club with Adidas because of how much replica kits that we buy, etc. So that's the obvious one to me. That's something that non-season ticket holders, supporters abroad can all do. In terms of what those season ticket holders and match-going supporters do, protest, walk-ins, walk-outs, as we'll come on to. For those who are abroad, maybe cancelling Celtic TV.
There are alternative ways.
Yes, there are. And then maybe if it was supporters clubs, like if they've got like I don't know if it's like a bigger licence or whatever, it's probably to make more money from Celtic TV if they cancelled. But it's difficult to find something that's really going to be impactful, because although we did have Celts for Change back in '94, football's changed so rapidly since then. There wasn't a TV deal of note back then that would have had the impact that it could have now in terms of doing that. There wasn't there was season tickets, but it wasn't as big a sort of season ticket culture back then as it was. You could, a lot of the time it was pay at the gate, and that's when things like boycotts were easier because you could just starve them of the money on the day.
Yeah.
And then that brings me to the home cup ticket scheme as well, because again, that's just a racket. Like, you're locked in to pay for tickets regardless of whether you go or not. So it's a good question, but the one thing that I think that we could all do would be starve them of money from merchandise, because it's such a big revenue stream.
Yourself, Stu?
I think that's one of the most interesting ones, because we know that money is obviously a huge motivation for them, and I think it's the pressure that not shareholders but stakeholders could apply to the Celtic board, and I think Adidas would be a pretty big one, where they might be like, why are we paying you all this money and nobody's buying the kits? What's going on? Why is there a boycott of our merchandise?
Yeah.
What can be done to change that? Oh, it's this man who's been over-promoted to his job and he's not very good at the job. Right, we'll get rid of him because we're paying you however many million over however many years. And then that's probably quite an easy decision for Celtic to make at that point. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that that's the sort of thing that's going to happen next week or the week after, but, you know, it's an absolute scandal how expensive that whole thing is. And they do just have people that are willing to go and pay it. And, you know, in terms of, I think public perception is just going to be a really big part of this. I think having walkouts, boycotts, etc., if people want to do that, it's going to all be about keeping the narrative in the media that there's a problem at the club, that highlights the issues at the club, that really just ramps up that it's not something that's going to go away and will escalate, and then ultimately it's just a case of something has to give here. And it's not a difficult decision for the club to make those changes, and whether or not we're talking about proper reform where you could get fan advisory board involved, or something where the fans can have more of a say going forward, or whether it's, you know, 3 more puppets come along and Desmond, you know, controls that. Do you know what I mean? But like, these are things, that's an easy thing for Celtic to do to make that stop. I think it is going to be a long road though, whatever people do, and I guess it's whether or not people have the stomach to continue that, especially if we play well and continue to be successful on the pitch. But if you think about how long the Bernard Higgins stuff went on for before you got a statement and got an acknowledgement, that was probably weeks, if not months, if I'm not mistaken.
It was months, yeah. And
I think that people are going to have to accept that protests against the Celtic board are now going to become a very common part of the match-going experience for Celtic until something changes.
I think that is a really good point, that it has to continue even if there's an upturn in form. Like, even if the new signings hit the ground running and things are going well on the pitch, we can't lose sight of that, because if we do, when we've mobilised to get to this point, and it's probably the most united the support have been in since the last time, since the last Celts for Change, that all this good work can't fall away because we start to win 2 or 3 now every week.
Yeah. Can I say a couple of things, right? Firstly, what I would say on these men is I think they are cowardly, and that's been shown by how they've acted.
Yeah.
They're very cowardly. I also think that people maybe underestimate how uncomfortable we can make them and in the stadium, because see the Hearts game when we lost to
Santa.
Yeah, when Santa lost, right? See that one game, they looked like petrified, right? And see the Kairat game, they looked nervous. We've got like 2 games coming up in a row at home against Hibs and Braga. That's the Sunday, the Wednesday. That's 2 games where, let's say Celtic perform okay. Let's say it's not, we beat Hibs 1-0 and we beat Braga 1-0, but the performances aren't very good. Even if the performances are good, see if we can just actually make them uncomfortable in the stadium. I think they're cowardly. I think Dermot Desmond will be like, look, I can't take a season of this. If Celtic's form does drop off, I think they're going there every week. Now, I'm not saying it's going to make change happen this season or thing, but I think they'll think twice about things. And I think they are not the type of they're not the type of men who are going to stand there proud and thingy. Michael Nicholson will shrink into his overgrown tie. Do you know what I mean?
I
overgrown
think
tie's not very good. I mean shirt. Sorry.
I think if Celtic's form drops off, then I think it's going to get really toxic really quick. Because something that I would like to mitigate as we progress over possibly weeks and months of campaigning against the board is that the team are somewhat insulated from it, and I know that that's almost impossible, and that you don't really want performances to drop off, and you don't want, if there are issues within the team, for them to be exacerbated by this. But we actually are at a position where if you don't do this now, then you're going to be stuck in this cycle that we have been for the last wee while. Some people might say, what a cycle of success. Well, no, it's a cycle of low standards and everything, and missed opportunities, and now is the time to sort of do that. But I think if it goes badly on the pitch, the focus will completely be on them, and I think it will be protests outside the ground before and after, all that sort of stuff. So I hope that's not the case. I hope that we can go and hopefully even from as early as Sunday see an uptick in the performances and the results, but with a very conscious effort that regardless of what happens on the pitch, we want change in the hierarchy of the club and the way that we do things, so that we don't, from January onwards, we don't conduct ourselves in the way that we have done before.
Well, one thing as well before we move on is people often say obviously the support has an influence on the team, which I completely agree with, right? But you can't tell me that all those players won't have seen that Sun article where the club essentially are saying it's all the manager's fault and he's trying to make himself leave. That's having an influence. Mm-hmm. The players will have seen that statement because everyone was talking about it. Everyone was, as you guys have said, everyone was talking about it in the British media.
Sky Sports News, TalkSport, everywhere.
You know, everyone was talking about it. They will have read that as well. So the fact is, as much as us trying to get the board out will have a negative influence, the board are already having a negative influence on the team.
Yeah, and just as you're saying that, I wonder if it would normally is against everyone else, but almost like a siege mentality between the management and the players to kind of stick together. It might contribute to that sort of uptick in form, but I think you're right. Players aren't daft. Like you see whenever you see whatever footage there is behind the scenes at Celtic Park, or whatever, there's always Sky Sports News on, so they wouldn't have been able to avoid it. Those are the players who aren't away, and you know that, especially the players who
McCowan,
so
Celtic fans.
Yeah, I don't know if it might make them kind of close ranks and then kind of win games in spite of the board, because that's what they've had to do anyway. But I think you're right. There has to be like a clear, when the support are there, the singing has to be backing the players and the team, as it always is. Yeah. But it's trying to detach that away from the bigger issue.
I'm sorry, did you say Luke McCowan was a Celtic fan? That's brand new information.
It's just a rumour.
That's brand new information.
See that video of him coming out and going, wow.
Well, listen, see, we're going to bounce back and forth, right, as I said, right? But essentially, there is a fan movement. There has been the open letter, which went out last week, which we discussed. It exploded over the last couple of days. There's been votes of no confidence from every major Celtic fan outlet and organisation. Pretty much every bus that's involved in it vote of no confidence. The Green Brigade, the North Curve, the Boys, the Celtic Supporters Association. What that led to was a meeting of the signatories in a venue in Glasgow yesterday, which I attended myself. And what that did was it showed the unity among a variety of different, as I say, supporters buses, fan media, supporters alliances. There was so many people there, and everyone kind of wanted to make a comment about various things. But essentially, I'm not going to go into too much detail quick because I think the actual content of the meeting that took place, it was people said various things, and that's, I'm not going to sacrosanct. Everything will come out though in terms of what the plan is. Stuart, this movement that we have, the Celtic unity, what's your thoughts on it?
I think it's really good. I'm pleased by how organised it appears at the moment. I thought that the North Curve had done a tremendous job with it, and I really loved as well the fact that they were very clear to say that they're not in charge of this, but they're just facilitating it because they have the infrastructure to do so. And I think that it shows an appetite to do things properly, democratically, and make sure that everyone has their voice heard. And so it doesn't become very, very easy for the Celtic board to try and splinter off groups, whether it's ultras groups, and say that these are hooligans and they're pyro and they're costing the club and they're dragging the club's good name through the mud and blah blah blah. These are ordinary Celtic fans. These are every Celtic fan you've ever known feels the way that everyone seems to feel, and so they're not putting party politics, for want of a better phrase, at the forefront of this. They're very much putting the wants and desires of the Celtic support first. I think it's going to be a difficult thing to continue to have everyone pulling in the same direction. I think it needs to continue to be organised and all the things that are positive about it. But all the signs just now are that there's a willingness to do that from all parties, and I think that that's a really positive thing. So without being at the meeting, without knowing more, I think everyone will have their own opinion on how they would like to go about trying to enact change. I think having clear goals and clear objectives of what success looks like is important, and then having the majority of people pulling in the right direction on how to go about getting that.
Yeah. Barry, yourself?
Yeah, totally agree. And the thing that's been most encouraging for me is how quickly this has been pulled together. Over the last 10 days or probably less than that, and it is refreshing that we know that the Celtic supports a broad church and people will have different opinions on things, but Stuart's right, there has to be clear achievable goals, sort of short term and long term, I think, and I think as you'll come on to, that kind of starts on Sunday.
Yeah, there was a fan consultation meeting, as mentioned, and here was the sort of update from it. This was released on most of the media outlets. Yesterday evening, a consultation meeting was held with the signatories of the recent open letter. The open letter has still to be addressed by Celtic, despite it representing tens of thousands of Celtic fans. The consultation meeting reflected the second step of acting as a collective fan movement for positive change at our club, and was attended by 85 in the room and 175 online. Comprehensive minutes will soon be shared with all signatories. At the meeting, there was an overwhelming consensus on the following points, which were compounded by a fan survey of 38,832 Celtic fans in advance of the meeting. So here are the four objectives. To build on the recent no confident votes on the Celtic FC board seeking the removal of Michael Nicholson, Chris Mackay, and Peter Lawwell. To build a strategic escalatory campaign against the Celtic board. To build a democratic and representative fan body, and to coordinate a late entry protest at Kilmarnock versus Celtic to further visualise and vocalise fan discontent. To help progress these points and the fan movement generally, a steering group of volunteers is being assembled. So that came out this afternoon, and since then, in regard to the stuff happening at Rugby Park, this was released. The 12 minutes without the 12th man. As Sunday's match versus Kilmarnock, Celtic's 12th man will enter the stand on the 12th minute to remind the Celtic FC board that let me start again. Fucking hell. As Sunday's match versus Kilmarnock, Celtic's 12th man will enter the stand on the 12th minute to remind the Celtic FC board that it exists. This bold visual and vocal protest follows a recent open letter signed by 420 signatories, which the board has failed to respond to, and a consultation meeting with these signatories. As a collective of fans, we wish no detriment to the team, but believe necessary steps must be taken to demonstrate our discontent and remind the board that football is nothing without the fans. Once we enter the stand, the team will receive vociferous backing. Lovely. We'll start with you, Barry. You'll be at the game on Sunday, obviously taking part in that. Is it a good first step?
I'll be in my seat an hour before time.
You get a right good seat there.
I think it's a good first step, yeah. I think I like the sort of symbolism of the 12th man and the wording that kind of finished the first paragraph of the statement that remind the board that it exists, because they're happy to take your money. And I think we made the point over the last few weeks, it's clear that they treat us with so much disdain and actively hate us. So I think we were kind of speaking off air before we came on, and the fact that the game's live on Sky, you'd imagine that the commentary team will mention that. I think Sutton, I saw him during the week, was kind of on with Kelly Coates talking about it, and very sort of he was giving his backing to the way that the supporter are reacting to the way the club's been run. So I think it will be eerie to start with. I think if you see it on the TV with the huddle with very little supporters there, hopefully no supporters there until the 12th minute, and the noise will be incredible. I think
when they come in, boom,
and imagine we scored at that point, that'd be lovely. But I think it's a good first start. It gets people talking, it gets the media keeping it in the media, and you mentioned about making them uncomfortable. The more that this is round the clock coverage, the better, I think, and this is a good visual way to kind of show that they do need us.
Yeah, absolutely. Stu, first start.
Yeah, I think Barry makes the good point. The fact that the game is televised on Sky, if, for example, it was 3 o'clock at Celtic Park and you did something like this, it might not have the same impact as a first step. But I do think that it's incremental, it's very easy to understand, and you're right with what you're saying about Sutton as well. It's actually been quite refreshing to see an ex-Celtic player being so vocal about it, and yeah, I think it's something that will have to start, and doesn't mean that you'll do the same thing every week, and I'm sure that as things escalate, things will change. We saw from the Bernard Higgins campaign that ultimately the best protest movements are disruptive, and that may well end up be where we kind of move towards. But for the time being, I think it is an important first step. And whatever happens, there's not, Celtic don't have their troubles to seek when it comes to their performances just now. There's a lot of narratives and a lot of things that will be coming out of Sunday's game, but that irrespective of the performance and the score, the protest will be headline news, definitely in Scotland, and you presume across Sky Sports as well. So it's important to just keep the pressure up. It's that whole notion of the stakeholders outside of Celtic being aware of that and catching wind of that, and why is this a story? Why is this happening? Why are you annoyed? Aren't Celtic objectively very successful? What's the problem? What are you protesting about? And this is a good way to get those conversations started or continuing.
Yeah, Charlie Mulgrew, he's someone who is looking angling for a job, told everyone we've done our moaning, it's time to move on. Very disappointing. Yes. But yeah, in terms of it, I think obviously, as mentioned, a steering group has been created to, help to escalate the protesting. This is a good first start, I think. In the room yesterday, there was a lot of positivity, some slight disagreements, which is always going to happen. Myself, Barry, a few others, we've given up our home ticket. We're off the home cup ticket scheme, not going to the Europa League home matches, which is devastating. I want to go to the Europa League games, but they released their prices very quietly. What did you make of that, Barry?
Yeah, I kind of seen some people say, the prices are fairly reasonable, but I think was it a 24% increase from 5 years ago, the last time we were in Europa, and yeah, I think they are just sort of sneaking things out now, because I think that's a positive thing, because I think they are feeling the effects of what's happening. I don't know, the one thing, and I don't know if it's because you see this new app that was released, a new ticketing app.
Yeah.
But I noticed there was no booking fees, and that was quite prominent. And it's interesting they can turn off booking fees when they want.
Well, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's maybe because of the new app. But yeah, I know it's not for everyone, but I suppose people will make a stand in whatever which way they feel is appropriate. So yeah, the prices, it could have been anything, and it still wouldn't really have appealed to me because of how I feel about the board. Like you, I would go to the moon to watch Celtic, do you know what I mean? But that's how I think I can take a stand personally.
Yeah, that's how I think I can take a stand as well. And we're not telling anybody to, do anything. What we're saying is, it's all about personal perspectives and person's point of view on how we kind of facilitate change. The merchandise one is probably the easiest one to do overall.
It's so nice as well.
Are you going to say, Stu?
Just that, whether or not people take up the Europa League tickets, or whether season ticket holders don't take them and then eventually on general sale, if that stadium sells out, as I say, it's to each their own. They will have people that want to take the opportunity when it's there. But the analytics of 10,000, 20,000 season ticket holders, if they're not taking that up, that should be a massive warning shot to the board, that you have people that are so dedicated and such diehard, you see, that they would be willing to take that step, that if they'll do that, what's next, or what else will they stop doing? And I think if you start to see everyone doing their own little thing as well, see if it's someone that says, do you know what, I can't not go, I'm going, but I'm not going to buy a pie. And then if there's enough people that are starting doing these things over the piece, you just will notice that on the spreadsheets, and that should be alarming in terms of how a club is run, how business is run, and you would take steps to address that. Yeah.
Also, see the thing with, I did 2 tours of the stadium, which were great, by the way. The tour guide's absolutely tremendous, really, really good. But I did them within about 6 months. Did it as a family thing, and then did it when our good friend Michael Chapman was over. Stuart,
I was literally with you.
Yes. When we were there...
I was invited.
Yeah, I mean, you were invited. When we were there, they said that there was a waiting list of 16,000 people, I think.
I think it was more than that. I think they said it was like 35,000 and that they closed it or something like that.
See, the 6 months before, they said it was 10. So what I'm trying to say is, there's a lot of threats of, if you give up your season ticket, someone will take it from behind, or you give up your Europa League package, someone will pick it up from behind, which I'm not saying isn't true, but I think they're very good at kind of spreading misinformation about what actually would happen if you don't take the Europa League.
I also think that you might have folk who aren't season ticket holders, who know that the opportunity's there, but feel so disenfranchised with the club that they'll say, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to withhold money, and I think that's perfectly valid. You saw if you're talking about in numbers, the fan survey that they had from the signatories, it generated 40,000 results in like 2 or 3 days, which is crazy. And that's only really hitting people that are online and probably within those spheres. I saw a couple of really good tweets actually from individuals that weren't represented by fan media, CSEs or whatever, that want to actively become signatories and campaigners, and I know that they are kind of taking steps to that.
Pillockry Butchers.
Just being chief among them.
Shout out to the Pillockry boys.
But there will be people just there. I'm certain that we'll have listeners here tonight that don't fall under one of these kind of categories, but they will feel passionately about that. And it's these people on top of those 40,000. If everyone there is starting to withhold funds in some capacity, it is quite a big thing.
Yeah, and that's something I think that the kind of new movement, I think, will be working towards, about how, because they kept saying that yesterday, even though it was kind of closed off to a representative from the signatories, they kept saying we need to get everyone, we need to make it feel like everyone's involved, and that's really important.
I'm certain that there'll be some sort of branding, membership, something or other, that it becomes like a Celtics for Change thing, where you're like, well, it's no longer just, my CSC was with that and I kind of think that, and so we're kind of represented. It'll be names on a sheet or whatever.
I was going to paraphrase a famous quote, but everyone, season ticket holder or otherwise, has their own particular part to play. No part is too great or too small. No one is too old or too young to do something.
Beautiful. Love it. In regard to the statement, we're not going to go over it because we went over it on Monday on the agenda, which drops every Monday, by the way, if you one of our most popular podcasts. We've mentioned how kind of condescending it was, and you wouldn't understand, wee man, no bother. It wasn't signed off by anyone. It dropped at 8:42 on a Saturday evening. I mean, how we were all together at that point. We were in the pub together. How raging were you, Barry?
It was kind of beggar's belief at first, I think. we had a few drinks.
Yeah, I was very drunk. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like, my mind playing tricks on me, but when I sobered up the next day, it was actually worse than my drunken me had thought it was. I was just dumbfounded, really. The fact that it went out at that time of night. Someone on another pod made a really good point that the Irish Association of Celtic Supporters, they'd put their name to the sort of statement as well. Not the statement, but the
Open letter.
The open letter. And it was put out when Ireland were actually playing. Like, was there consideration of that? Like,
exactly.
A large percentage of Irish Celtic Supporters Club would have been actually watching a game of football at the time. And it's just tone deaf. I think, I know it's been kind of done to death this week, like people have picked holes in it. It was kind of, even in the mainstream media, it's been, I know Simon Jordan, that wonderful chap, tore it to shreds, but it's just
he is a wank, but
yes.
he eloquated that point.
It's like that
well.
The worst person in the world has
made a good point. Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many holes in it. I thought it was contradictory. It went on for far too long, and it was just downright lies, like bullshit throughout.
Yeah, the PSR stuff, we're not going to go over it because I think it's been kind of debunked that over a 3-course period you're allowed to make 60 million in losses. And we've been in profit every year. It's just lies, Stu.
Yeah, that's it. And just no contrition, no acceptance of any...
no apology, nothing.
No apology, no, we'll plan to do better with this. And just really almost just trying to like bamboozle folk with the length of it. I mean, certainly trying to read it in the pub at that time was nigh on impossible. It's just word soup. And again... Similar to the Sun briefing, it was so heartening to see it being slated far and wide.
Straight off the bat, yeah.
In mainstream media coverage as well, Sky Sports News, they had people on just talking about how bad it is. And it's really telling that they haven't... I don't know... I think they'll be shitting themselves. I think they'll be sitting there going, right, what do we do here? Because they're very, evidently very bad at crisis management. We saw that in the 10th season.
Damage limitation style.
What's next? People demand a sit-down interview with Michael Nicholson. Do they really want to put Jerry McCulloch out and be like, right, Michael, obviously there's been some disquiet.
Michael, there's been some issues around the support.
Oh, we all agree. Do you know what I mean? Like, having the opportunity to sort of pad it back.
Can you imagine if they did a softball interview? And it was like, absolutely great, Michael, thank you.
You saw how bad that was when Lowell did it.
Remember that sitting at the boardroom table?
Dreadful, absolutely dreadful. So, to be fair, I feel like they had one shot at that and they really fucked it. They had one shot at it and they put it straight into their foot. So, I'm not really sure what else they can do now. I
mean, see they must have read it and went, perfect. See the guy, whoever it was that went, that is ideal, by the way. That's answered all their questions.
His knuckles and hit send.
Another beauty. Boom. I just had a question from our good friend Ken. Ken's based in Dublin. Hi, Weekly Gang. Hi, Weekly Gang. After the last weekend, after fucking hell, Barry, you'll be back you'll be back next week. Hi, Weekly Gang. After the last week and a half, has your anger?
Okay.
Like, Ken's not written it very well either, right? I'll be honest.
You're like this Celtic board. Oh, it's Ken's fault. Gall's briefing to the Sun that Ken can't spell.
What's that probably says? You stuttering prick.
It's Goodfellas, isn't it?
Goodfellas, yeah.
When he shoots Spider in the foot.
Hi,
Weekly Gang. After the last week and a half, has your anger subsided or has it grown stronger? What do you think are the differences between Celts for Change and now? And after a long debate with myself, I've decided to boycott all home Europa League games, merchandise, and I only bought Paradise Windfall within the stadium, so that will stop. Do you think there's enough of us that will do this? Hail, hail, and up the dubs. The fact that Ken obviously comes over from Dublin for these games and stuff, that's a huge sacrifice. So absolutely well done. Fantastic stuff. In terms of, I'll just start Celts for Change. What the difference is, Celtic were on their knees, obviously in 1994, and it was a real, as Barry says, the landscape of everything has changed. You know, mobile phones, interconnectivity with everything, how quickly news travels is both positive and negative, I think, because you can't kind of blindside anyone with like protests or, you know, the board turn up and all of a sudden we're there, because it'll be so kind of choreographed and it'll be kind of signposted. There's other things, but I think the difference is that Celtic were on their knees and the only way was up, whereas a lot of our support right now are happy. Not all of it, but some support. Barry, what's your kind of thoughts about the differences?
They're about, like Alan always kind of mentions, there's some supporters, and it's fine, who just all they care about is what's happening on the pitch on a Saturday or a Wednesday or whatever, or a Thursday, because they fucking back up the Champions League.
They'll be bailing. Saturday, Wednesday.
Turn up in a game and they're not there. But I think as we both kind of said, like the landscape has changed, and not to be sort of disparaging, but I think there's more distraction now. It's maybe not the be all and end all for some that it was back then, because it was a simpler time, but to flip that in the positive, it is quicker to get mobilised, as we've seen in the last couple of weeks. Information can get out. You can quash bullshit quicker than you could back then, because it was basically like the tabloid press, wasn't it, back then? But what I do worry about is, as you say, Gall, things to the outside. I was listening to Clyde on the way over, and they were kind of saying, but it's been so successful the last 14 years, and I think we need to kind of put that noise aside, similar to when people say, like, oh, that's embarrassing, you'll embarrass the club, like Rangers fans will see us and laugh at us. Like, put all that shit to the side. They hate us regardless. So we need to focus on what's important. And as we've said throughout the podcast tonight, no matter if these new signings, which we all hope to do, hit the ground running, we start to put results together at home and in the Europa League, that we can't lose sight that unless we kind of strike now when everyone is feeling this way, I don't think we'll have a better opportunity than we have right now to force serious change. So we can't let that subside because of a few good results on the pitch.
Absolutely. Look, we're going to focus for the last kind of 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the actual game, because there's a game of football happening on Sunday. We'll cover that on the Cynic on Saturday. We'll have a preview. Our good friend will be looking at Celtic from a tactical point of view. We'll get the opposition perspective. We'll also look at the press conference tomorrow as well. We also have a feature looking at the transfer window overall with Anthony Joseph, Christian and Graham as well. So that's dropping on Friday. In regard to the Celtic game against Kilmarnock on Sunday, Stuart, your thoughts on that game going into it? It's obviously quite hard to actually think about Celtic as a football club.
I'm quite looking forward to that side of it.
Yeah.
We've watched some really bad football lately, between the Kyrat game, the Rangers game, watched the Scotland game, it's dreadful. And then you're going to Rugby Park on one of the worst pitches on planet Earth. And that's difficult, especially because you're probably going to have to play quite a different team, I would imagine, just from the business that we did towards the end of the window. There's a lot of unknowns, which I find quite exciting.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity. I don't think it's an ideal place to go for this sort of game, but you never know. I think that it'll be interesting tomorrow to see where the squad are at, who can play and who can't. You know, they released training footage earlier in the week. Everything looked very rosy in the garden. Rodgers seemed pretty happy. The new players seemed like they were settling in well, but there was no Tierney, no Ralston, so you might be looking at 90 minutes of Sriracha and Kobe Donovan, which in itself, which are, that's what I'm saying, even when he's playing, I'm like, who's this guy? Which is interesting in and of itself. Then you have a midfield that's not really been functioning, but you got to presume that Benjamin Negron's going to come back into the centre of the pitch. Presume Balikwisha's going to play because he was there. Is Tanecki had enough training? Is he back in? Can he literally play on the right wing? And then you've got this huge question mark over Dyson Maeda, which I think is going to dominate a lot of the discussion tomorrow with Rodgers. There was the reports today that he is planning a sit-down meeting to see where his head's at and stuff like that, and whether he's ready to play. And then you've got Kelechi Iheanacho, whether or not he's fit and ready to go and step in. So the lineup will be very interesting. If we can play with a bit more pace and intensity that we haven't really seen, which is obviously difficult on that surface. And then with the background of everything that's happening with the protests, I think it'll be a really interesting day.
It's funny, you just said if we play with the pace and intensity, and we've been saying that since February.
Yeah, but I did say it lacked, so I wasn't saying that it was...
No. You're saying if we can. I wasn't throwing you under the bus. There's a question from Andy. This is the last thing I'll read out, right? So just bear with me, right?
Do you want me to read it? You all right? I'm joking.
Take your time.
Take your time.
Deep breaths.
Oh, Jesus. Andy McDougall. As far as the on-off pitch...
Pulling at the first third.
Okay. I'm looking forward to the game on Sunday and intrigued to see how we line up, particularly in attack. The biggest question is perhaps who plays on the right wing. We spent 10 million on 2 left wingers in addition to having Maida. Do we rotate the 3 of them around and hope one can make the right wing their own? Or will Rodgers start Yang or Forrest? Then, assuming Iheanacho isn't ready to start, is Maeda our number 1 striker until January? Or will Kenny get a start after being named in the Europa League squad? Will he start over Shin? Interesting points, Andy. Obviously, you just mentioned there about Maeda. That kind of broke on the Saturday. He did an interview with the Japanese press, and he mentioned that he was very keen to move on. He said that to the club before the end of last season. Barry, looking at that, as Andy says, you've got a number of questions. Stu kind of touched on it as well. What do you think? How do you think it will shake out?
Yeah, I think kind of Stu mentioned earlier, this weekend's, there's a lot of anticipation because tomorrow all eyes will be on Rodgers' press conference, and then you'll try and sift through if he does address the bigger issues off the pitch. Then it'll be really interesting to see who's fit, who's available, who's come back from international duty, if there's any injuries there. And I think it is exciting in a way because there are new players there, and we all love new players. Whether we got them in at the right time or not, that's a whole bigger issue. We clearly didn't get them in at the right time. But Stu mentioned that sort of intensity and pace. The kind of only thing we can hope is that these new players will provide us. That's what's different from February, that they can provide that for us, provide a spark. And it is like, I saw a kind of Swedish football expert talking about Tanecki, and he said he's very much a left-sided winger. Like, he was asked the question, could he play on the right? He said, yeah, but you get the best out of him on the left.
That's like anyone can, like, can Maida play on the right? He has played on the right before, but you don't get the best out of him. Yeah.
So I wonder if maybe we'll move, because I thought Balagwisha was okay at Ibrox. I know we were all sort of annoyed that he never took his full back on, but I wonder if it will be a case of rotating the 2 wingers, the old switcheroo, as we used to do, to find which one can perform the best there. But yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it. It's you used the kind of points I kind of butchered it last week about when it comes to the end of the window and you do get players in, you just have to enjoy it because otherwise you could just live in perpetual misery.
Yeah,
but
much.
There is so much anticipation about this weekend because of everything surrounding the club, and we can sort of make the first step to kind of claiming back our club off the field with the first visual protest against the board, and if we could couple that with a performance and a victory, then things will start to feel a wee bit more positive for moving forward.
What I would say that it doesn't sound like a positive, but I think it is one, is that I think expectations are pretty low at the moment for some of these new players, for the way that we've been playing, for all the noise around the club, that I think if Celtic went and were, say it was like 5-0 and they absolutely blew the doors off, I don't think anyone would sort of see that coming. I think it would just be, I wonder, just when you're talking about selection, whether or not, as they try and figure out that right wing, left wing sort of situation, whether they do just go with James Forrest because he knows the position.
Do you think he's going to play both? That's the question. Do you think he'll play 2 brand new wingers? You know, I know Balakisha played that game against Ibrox, but you know, it's thrown in. Do you think he'll start them if he can?
If it was me, I would, because we've been I know domestically we've been okay apart from Ibrox, but I think it is to inject that sort of new wave and new energy to get these players up to speed. Just throw them in and see what happens. Yeah,
I think it'll be interesting what happens with Iheanacho as well, because there's 2 schools of thought whether Rodgers has to protect him a little bit and sort of drip feed him into games. Can he make an impact off the bench and then you give him a start, or whether you just go, he's my guy, I back him and put him straight in. And what I would say is that I think Kelechi Iheanacho comes with a lot of baggage. I do think he's probably a really good finisher. That's what I think would be the main benefit of having him in the team. And we've seen pretty much every game from pre-season till now a combination of Kenny, Maeda, Ida, Shin all have golden chances that they're not putting away. And if we can be a bit more functional in creating chances, I do think Iheanacho is a player that could potentially thrive. But I think a lot of it will come down to application, how much he wants it, professionalism, all these sorts of things, and it'll be good to get some answers to that. I've also made a sneaky little bet. I mentioned it, I'm sure, to you all earlier on, that I think that Brendan Rodgers will invoke the name of Scott Sinclair when he's talking about players that, could come back up and rehab their career. So that's just one to watch for the presser tomorrow.
I mean, the whole thing about Iheanacho is I like a redemption arc. I think I like a redemption arc at Celtic, but again, it's about how he was brought in.
Of course. But we have to. What I'm quite looking forward to is that we can, with the game, you can put all that stuff to one side, and just it will be nice. We've Celtic are playing at the weekend after being off for 2 weeks, and it's taken us nearly an hour to talk about the actual football. So it'll be quite nice to talk about, hopefully, pros more than cons of some of these players. And I think Tanecki could hopefully surprise some people. I think because he's come in under such a cloud and has quite an interesting sort of backstory, that maybe he's one that you could kind of latch onto. And we talked about it a little bit last week, that I think if just someone can put their head up and be the one, then takes a bit of pressure off Hatate, a bit of pressure off McGregor, a bit of pressure off Engels, and then they start playing a bit more like themselves, and suddenly you start to kind of get into a bit of a groove.
Yeah, great stuff. As I say, over the next couple of days, the Cynic do daily podcasts. Tomorrow we'll have that feature podcast on the transfer window, which should be really interesting and insightful. We'll also have the press conference. We'll look at that and we'll kind of break it down a little bit. Then on Saturday we'll have the preview, opposition report, looking at Kilmarnock from a tactical point of view, stats point of view, and we'll get the analysis from an opposition supporter. Then on Sunday we'll have the reaction straight after the game. We react to every single game straight after. So looking forward to it. Barry, it's been an absolute pleasure and joy. We'll get you back in the hot seat next week. Thanks for getting involved, sir.
Thanks very much, loved it. Bring on Sunday.
Bring it on. Stuart Duggan, a pleasure as always. Speak to you soon.
Thank you very much. Sack the board, of course.
Lovely stuff. Yeah, great stuff. From Stuart Duggan, from Barry Gallagher, from myself, Chris Gallagher, this has been the Cynic Weekly. Sack the board, up the Celts, on the hoops. And we'll speak to you down the road. I forgot the catchphrase again.